Hello, fellow Inquisitors! Split Persona here, and welcome back to another Inquisitor Martyr tutorial video. Today, we are going to be covering how to prepare for a coming season. Now, the previous season just ended, and in order to get ready for a new season, there's a few things that everyone should know. I myself have gone and done, ever since I started playing this game, every season. And I can show you here real quick. Wrong one. I can show you real quick here. I have attained rank 4 with everything except for my very first one. That is the only one that I have not attained rank 4 with. I'm still attempting to reach rank 5. I've gotten close multiple times, but yeah, it's something that still eludes me. One day I'll get there. But I am going to go over some prep work that you can do to at least get to level 4. There's a lot that goes into getting ready for a season. Some things that involve prepping your character, and some things that you can do during the off season to practice. And we're going to go over those, and we're going to start one at a time, and we're going to cover them. The first thing is know your skills and your abilities. The biggest thing that you're going to be using when you're fighting is, yes, your weapons, but you're also going to be using your skills. Do not be afraid during off-season time to play around with some of your skills in an attempt to find a build that works for you. There's a lot of builds out there that people say is the meta for the game, or, the ultimate damage dealer. But if you're playing it and you build it, it may not be right for you. You may start it and it just doesn't feel right. That's why I don't do build tutorials. I do guides on how characters start and what skills they have, but I will not do a build tutorial simply because everyone is going to play a character different. My suggestion is play around with your skills. Try something different. The other thing is you're going to be starting out when seasons start at level 1. And a lot of your skills will be locked. So a lot of these builds that people do won't work in the beginning. You're going to have to unlock stuff in order to even gain that momentum that those builds are saying. So don't be afraid to start a brand new character and start with just the basic skill, like this Scion Combustor. Just a basic simple construct. If you get to know how this one works, you eventually may want to go with, instead of running, the Castellan robots, you may want to have just an entire army of combustors just running around, just fighting for you if you're running a tech adept. Know your skills. Find what works for you. Play around with characters. Don't be afraid to create new characters. Try out new skills and see how they function. The hardest levels that you're going to have are going to be levels 1 to 15 or 20. Those are going to be the hardest levels to get. After that, most of your skills and abilities will be unlocked. You'll still have some, depending on what class you take, that will be locked for a little bit later, but a majority of your major ones will be unlocked by between 15 and 20. So getting up to that point is going to be your hardest task. So don't be afraid to just ignore builds and just go with whatever is available for you until you get to that range. If you play around with your skills, you can tinker while you're doing that, getting up to those levels. And then once you have your build that you've played with, pre-season, once you have unlocked it, then you can do it. But don't be afraid to tinker with stuff while you're in the season. You may find something you didn't notice before and change it while you're in the middle of the season then. Be experimental. Don't be afraid to change a skill. You may want to try an all-turret run. You may want to try a combustor run. You may never use a Castellan robot, ever, if you run Tech Adept. If you run a Crusader, you may never use, some of his weapons. You may never use some of his armor sets. It all depends on how you build the character, what feels comfortable to you, and, again, what is going to allow you to progress the fastest. So keep in mind, don't be afraid to ignore everybody's meta builds, because a meta build only works if you have access to everything that they do. And in the beginning, you don't. And that is the most critical time for a season, is the very beginning. Because if you can't progress through the very first few levels, those first 15 or 20 levels of your character are going to be the hardest to progress. So don't be afraid to ignore everybody else's guide builds on how to build the perfect damage dealing class, because you're not going to be able to. You don't have access to what they do, because a lot of those characters are level 60 and above. So yes, they're good for endgame, but even then, unless you get lucky on some of your rolls, you're not going to get it. So experiment. That's the first piece of advice. Experiment with a character build that fits you. The second piece of advice I'm going to give is the first thing you need to progress. The first thing you're going to want to do is skip the tutorial, because it'll bump you up a little bit. And you need to immediately do story mode, because you want to unlock your inoculator customization, your crafting, and then your Tarot and Void Crusade options. You have to progress so far in the story. I believe it is the first 2 chapters in the story in order to get them unlocked. Once they are done, my advice, go down here to mission deployment and just complete whichever mission you are most comfortable with. It's the same as your builds. Whatever your build is geared towards in the beginning, do those missions. If you have a character that's, good at dealing out a ton of damage, to single targets, do assassinations and hunts. If you have a character that's good at dealing a ton of damage to large groups of enemies, do purges. If you have a character that can heal and, defend characters or NPCs, do rescues and panic rooms. Focus on the missions that are going to be geared towards your character builds in the beginning, because whatever is functioning with your build that your character is and what you're comfortable with, that is going to allow you to progress the fastest. If you complete the story mode, you will normally get quite high in your first 20 levels. And then if you complete a few of these, you will normally hit level 20 quite quickly. It will take some time, but it will not be long. So my suggestion, complete the story mission until you unlock Uther's Tarot. Once you unlock Uther's Tarot, you then have access to everything you need in your command bridge. You have your crafting, you have the tarot deck, you have the Void Crusade once you hit level 35, and you have your inoculator customization over here. So, story mode, up to I believe it is the beginning of chapter 3, and then you go into just the random mission deployments. After that, you can just do whatever else is being recommended by the missions in the season. Some season objectives are that you come over here and you talk to the astropath and you do priority assignments. You can do those for a lot of rewards. Once you hit level 35, you can come to the Void Crusade and you can create a Void Crusade. Do whatever is going to allow you to level up and gain rewards the fastest. If you want to, go and do story missions. Those give quite a bit of XP, and they reward decent amounts of rewards. And they're decent and good. Don't be afraid to just complete the story after that. Nothing is stopping you from going and doing them. Do whatever is going to be the fastest, the ones you know the best, and the ones you are most comfortable with in order to advance your levels the fastest. The next thing we're going to talk about is your passives. One thing that will trip up everybody very quickly in the beginning of any season is their character's speed. So my advice, do not be afraid to dump a few points into movement. Don't go far, but I would definitely say at least get to here. Because this will give you quite a bit of movement speed naturally here. And then this gives you plus 10% movement speed when you're not in combat. There are going to be maps where there's no enemies around you and you're just trying to travel from one section to another. That 10% movement speed, you don't realize it, but that does come in very handy. Yes, this does take up 4 points here. You don't have to go farther, but I would definitely recommend putting 4 points, at least, into the movement speed to get to here. Once you do that, you can focus your enchantment points on your armor to boost your damage, to boost your health, to boost your defense, and then focus the rest of your points on the rest of your passives. But, like I said, movement speed is critical. You would not believe how much time you are going to spend just trying to navigate a map and moving through it from one area to the next, and how much time that will take. There's a lot of time you will waste just waiting for your character to get from one end of the map to the other. Movement speed is critical. I would definitely recommend getting at least 4 points into movement so you can unlock the motoric boost. Once you do that, you get the 10% movement speed when you're not in combat, plus you get these other movement speed bonuses, and they do stack, so you will be faster. Then you can dump the points into whatever else you want. If you did want to do a few more movement speeds, there are 2 more down here that will boost it as well. So it would just take 3 more to go and max out the movement speed in this tree. So I would say if you're going for maximum movement, it's just going to be these 4 here and then 3 more. And it does grant you an immunity to slow, stun, shock in exposed states. Early on, that is critical. You are not going to have very good armor. You are not going to have very good health or defense. You are always going to be in an exposed state. And that immunity to slow, stun, and shock is going to be a lifesaver. Literally, the fact that you are going to be immune to them in the exposed state. You will be able to still move. You will still be able to get away. So that perk alone could save you from dying. So I would definitely recommend one of the other things you do, the first thing you set your skill points into, your passive points, is go into that movement tree and start putting some points into that. The next thing we're going to talk about is a real simple, easy way to get a ton of loot and a ton of levels. Void Crusades. I've done 2 episodes on how they function, what they do, and their mechanics. And my suggestion, just start at 1 and try out each individual one. The reason for this is there is a 5th level achievement, it's either 5th or 4th, I believe, that requires you to complete all of them. So if you're low and you just try to rush and just not even worry about doing all the levels in a Void Crusade, just do the start point and do the quickest path all the way to the end, you'll still get the end loot. You won't be able to open all the chests, but you will still have at least 2 chests that you can open, plus the Supreme chest, because you get 2 keys for completing a Void Crusade. So you will be opening 3 Void Crusade chests, no matter what, even if you just take the shortest path. So my suggestion is, as soon as you get a Void Crusade unlocked, that is an easy way to get a ton of high-level gear and a ton of levels. So don't be afraid to, as soon as you start getting your shards, don't be afraid to go and just run through each one of these. And like I said, there's an achievement for seasons, for every season, to complete one of each of these. Once you find one you like and ones you don't, dismantle the ones you don't like and create the ones you do. And then just keep going back and just replaying the ones you like. The more you do them, the better you'll get. And then when you have to do those harder assignments for the season, such as completing a Void Crusade run in 75 minutes with all the keys and all the info fragments, which in my opinion is one of the hardest achievements, you will know that Void Crusade like the back of your hand and be able to do it because you've done it multiple times. Pick Void Crusades you like. There are multiple ones. Don't be afraid to try all of them. Like I said, you need to do all of them anyway to get to the one achievement. Try them all out. See which ones you like. If you like the way one works over the others, dismantle all of them and focus on that one to do all your special achievements. There's an achievement for, like I said, completing it in 75 minutes with all the keys and info fragments. There's one where you have to get the servo skull in it to unlock an extra key. There's one where you have to complete it in hardcore mode. There's one where you have to complete it, with all the missions completed. Don't be afraid to practice and run multiple Void Crusades. Void Crusades, like I said, easy XP, easy loot. You can practice these during the off-season. Practice them during the off-season. This is a great, great way to know where everything is located. Learn the Void Crusade. Learn where everything is. Do this during the off-season so that when the season starts, you know exactly where everything is and you can just go straight to it. There are maps that you can get that will show which levels have the items you need, such as the keys and the info fragments. They are very easy to find. I still use one for Mayan simply because I don't ever want to miss one. But I've done it enough that even if I have my map up, I normally can find it. I just use my map to make sure I can check off my little box so I don't miss it. So, again, Void Crusades. Easy levels, easy loot, a fantastic way to advance your character and check off those boxes that are required for the season. The next thing we're going to talk about is boosters. You will get boosters in the form of a consumable when you're playing. They come in Intel, Extreme Fortune, Meme Virus, Destruction Amplification, Litany or Serendipity, Survival Enhancement, Ultimate Fortune, Benediction of Abundance, and Mind Reset. And the way each of these work is, I'll have to go and actually make a video on them, is they boost certain aspects. Don't be afraid to use them. For instance, this one, the Meme Virus. 100% experience for your next mission. That is huge. If you're trying to level up fast and you go and you do an exterminate mission or an assassination mission where there's like a lot of high level enemies, use this. It'll double how much XP you're getting from that mission. Or if you're doing the final level of a Void Crusade where it's the boss and you're on, like, say, your last 2 lives, do Destruction Amplification, plus 50% damage. You'll do extra damage to the boss and everything else in that level, and give you a better chance of surviving it. Or, let's say you just want to try to find better items. Litany of Serendipity significantly increases the chance of finding relic items in the next mission. If you want to just go and try to increase your loot and get better quality items so you can do better, use this. Don't be afraid to use the consumables you have. You can find them in missions. You can buy them from the store, on the ship, on the bridge. You know, they are very valuable. Don't be afraid to use them. They come in handy. Some of them allow for an extra death. Extremely useful. If you're doing certain missions, like this past season, there were seasonal missions where you had to go and do seasonal boss fights or seasonal objective missions. Don't be afraid if you're still feeling a little bit low on your damage and health and defense. activate one of these so you don't fail that seasonal mission. You'll gain an additional life, pretty much. That is phenomenal. Stuff like that is extremely valuable. Don't be afraid to use them. And if you're running into a situation where, you're running out of missions to do, or you want to try something different, there are intel missions. Valuable information about a special mission with high risk and high rewards. They always have modifiers, they're always higher level, but they give you better gear. It's kind of like a miniature Void Crusade final mission. It's going to be a high risk, high reward, single use mission. If you've got these and you're doing pretty good, don't be afraid to use them. They work very well for going and getting better gear, better loot. It's a quick one-shot Void Crusade. You have to consume it, but it helps. It'll get you levels, it'll get you gear. Like I said, consumables are a valuable asset. Don't be afraid to use them. They will always come in handy. They will always give you a bonus. And like I said, you will need every bonus once you get your season started. Again, you will not get all of these immediately. You will start to get these at higher levels. But by that time, you are going to be going and dealing with tougher enemies. You are going to be having a harder time leveling up. You're going to need those, extra experiences. You're going to need that damage bonus for those stronger enemies and, the less XP or the more XP it takes to level up every time. You're going to need these. Don't be afraid to use them. You're going to have to use your consumables, but use them wisely. Like I said, you can find them in missions, you can buy them from the store if they're available, and my suggestion, they are an invaluable asset when it comes to this. I normally will hold on to mine until I start running a Void Crusade, because the stronger the Void Crusade gets, the more difficult it is, the more rewards you get, including gear and XP. If I can double down on my XP on some of my missions, awesome. If I know, depending on what mission I'm running, that it's not going to be real difficult and it's just going to be a simpler mission, I'll run something where I can have a higher chance of getting, a relic. Something where I can get something better. That is the goal of a consumable. Increases your odds of getting a higher return for what you're putting in. So don't be afraid once you start getting them to use them, but use them wisely. The next thing is Psalm codes and Relic shards. You need to have powerful gear and powerful enhancements to beat this game. Building a character is going to be extremely, not challenging, but it is going to be extremely in-depth if you want to progress to the higher levels. And that is where these two things come into play. If you look at items, they will have little sockets. And these sockets are where you put these in. They come in different varieties, they come in different levels, and they each have different effects. As you see here, this one gives me shield drain. If I look at this one, depending on what item I put it in, it will give me either energy shield efficiency, cooldown reduction for all skills, or it'll give me extra movement speed. Again, very useful features. And depending on if you're using a Relic Shard or a Psalm Code, you can get powerful bonuses. If you go with a Psalm Code setup, depending on how you do it, you may unlock a Psalm Code Doctrine, which if you combine them in certain configurations, you unlock a bonus, which will increase and give you an additional stat. So always keep in mind your values for your items are not just what's here. There are ways to increase those stats using Psalm Codes and Shards. But in order to get these in, you have to go and have your crafting menu. And it requires you to unlock your tech tree quite far. So that is part of the seasonal objective, is unlocking your crafting tree and unlocking the tech tree itself. You have to unlock your tech tree quite far to get to the point where you can do the socketing ability, where you can put shards in, take them out, put codes in, take them out, do crafting of them so you can get the stronger varieties. There is an entire setup for these here, but they will provide you with extremely strong bonuses. It is highly, highly advised, once you get to the point where you have decent gear, I would highly recommend going and playing with setting up your shards and Psalm Codes and your Psalm Code Doctrines. And this is where pre-season you can practice. Don't be afraid to take your characters that you have already and just mess around with Psalm Codes. Figure out how Psalm Code Doctrines work. Like this here. I have these 4 Psalm Codes here, and it gives me this ability. Don't be afraid to do that. This here, I have these 3 Psalm Codes, and it gives me this ability. So, like I said, putting in Psalm Codes and Shards is going to increase your stats. Don't be afraid before a season starts to play around and experiment. That's the only way you're going to learn how something functions. Try it out. See how it works. That's the best thing I can tell anybody. The last thing we're going to talk about is your crafting menu. Now, it's something I don't talk about with, my videos and stuff like that. But this is a very, very important feature of the game, in my opinion. You salvage down items you do not want over here, and it gives you your resources down here. Then you get your blueprints. This is potentially how you can get extremely powerful items in the game without putting in a lot of effort. If you have a bunch of junk items, you just go through missions, collect everything you want, you bring it back, you salvage them all up, you get your crafting materials, then you come over here and you go through your blueprints. And you just select what you want to craft. Once it's crafted, then you can modify it. And you, as long as you have the resources, you can change its properties. You can re-roll its values. You can enhance it. You can increase its levels. You can do a lot to this. You can change how this all functions. You can add shard sockets to this as well. Now, certain items can't accept it, but other items you can pop in here and you can add sockets onto them. For instance, if I were to go and say create this, and then we go over here, I can add a socket to it. And then I've just increased a stat and added it to a piece of armor that I've customized to match what I want it to do. I've changed how I want this to be. I have not only customized my character, I have customized the armor and the weapons that my character is using. Don't be afraid to create random stuff and just take a roll of the dice, per se. Reroll all enchantments. Don't be afraid to. And just see what you get. You never know what enchantments are bound to an item until you roll it. You can re-roll the value of that. If it says, it's a little bit low, you can roll that to be a little bit higher. If it's good enough, take it off, go over to forging, add some sockets to it, and then throw an item into it and increase it even farther. Don't be afraid to work with the crafting system once you get it. Between that and knowing how your custom character works is crucial. And this is where a lot of pre-season work comes in. Play around with a character, figure out what combinations work. What do you need to do for your character? What do you need to do for your weapons? What do you need to do for your armor? What shards are you looking for? What psalm codes and psalm doctrines are you looking for? Just because you don't have it when you start out does not mean you cannot look for them. And the more you look for them and the more you get, the stronger your character will become as you progress, and the easier it'll be to do those more difficult parts of the seasonal objectives. That is my advice. Experiment, play around, and just try out new things. You're not going to know how something works until you try it out. You have to know how your character functions, what weapons work with it, and you have to know whether or not your enchantments that you put on it function. Some enchantments will work with certain skills, other ones will not. So that is my advice. Play around, experiment, and try it all. But that is going to be it for this episode. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like. If you guys have any, suggestions or tips as well, leave them down in the comments. If you want to see more from me, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next episode. Hopefully you guys will be looking forward to the next season. I know I am. I am looking forward to seeing what they have planned. This last one was a pretty decent one. So thank you all for watching, and have a good day.